Hey friends, Andrew Hines here, and I just wanted to take a moment to introduce today's episode. Today I had on the show Spencer Gatten, who is a pretty inspiring young guy. He's just in his mid-20s, and he's kind of gone a different path, and he's managed to acquire quite the real estate portfolio. And he's a few years ahead of where I was at that point in time, and I found it very inspiring. I wanted to have him on the show. What we do is we get into the nuts and bolts of converting a single family home into a duplex in this episode. We also talk about how he was able to achieve a 41% return on investment. Yes, 41% on his investment into his current project. He's actually just in the process of refinancing it right now. So we're going to get into those nuts and bolts. We talk a lot of shop in this episode. So for those of you who are wondering about the tangibles about how to do it, you're going to want to stay tuned. For those of you who are listening to this on iTunes, just got approved today. Very excited about it. I was hoping that you would be able to give me a 5-star review and maybe leave me some feedback. Of course, constructive is more than welcome. Want to make this better? If you're interested in getting a hold of me, getting in touch, if you have some feedback for me, why not head on over to my website, Andrew-Hines, Hines is my last name, .com. Click the contact form and go ahead, fill that out, and we'll get in touch. Without further ado, here is today's episode. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. This is episode 5. I am here with Spencer Gatten, who is a real estate investor, and he has been quite proficient in investing in multifamilies, specifically duplexes, and doing duplex conversions. It's going to be a really cool episode, so I wanted to bring him on and have him share his story, maybe give us a little case study on what he's been up to. So Spencer, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm great, thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Slowly getting a few more guests on the show, so you're guest number 3, and I'm looking to continue to build more of them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to do just to start things off is have you tell us a little bit about yourself. How you got started in real estate investing in the first place and where you're going with it.
Yeah. Okay. So, not everybody knows this who I usually meet at the networking events, because I don't always dive right into this, but the biggest thing that actually got me started in real estate investing is I actually used to be an actor. Most people don't know that, but
I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I was pursuing acting for a few years. I had actually moved to Vancouver for a little bit while I was doing that. While I was there, they kind of said, well, you're from the GTA. Why don't you go get your career started out there? Was doing that. Everything was going pretty well, and it just was never taking off enough. I was never making enough money from it. And I kind of always worried about retirement. And as an actor, you don't have a pension, you don't have anything like that. So you're always a little bit worried, like, okay, how am I going to retire if I'm not extremely successful down the road and everything like that. And then at the same time, my agent actually quit and left the industry. So I was kind of a broke actor. My agent quit. I was kind of starting from scratch, and I was like, okay, I got to figure out what to do here. I'm going to work for a few years and then save up some money and then dive back into acting. While I was working, I was still thinking, man, how am I going to retire as an actor? Because there's 2 ways that you can kind of have a job as an actor. One of which is you can work part-time minimum wage, so you can't pay for your living. Or the second option is you can work full-time, where you can't have the flexibility for auditions. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to work the part-time minimum wage and be able to pursue acting, I'm going to have something to retire with. So then I started doing all my research and everything like that. And I'm investing in stocks, ways to make money online, and constantly trying to just figure out the get-rich-quick scheme. Like, how am I going to do this? And then I feel like I kind of had the same experience that a lot of people have, which is their purple book story, Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Okay, yeah.
Yep. So I came across that book, and I read it, and I was like, oh yeah, build income sources for yourself, build businesses, assets, all these things. And I was like, that makes sense. And then luckily we live in the day and age where we have podcasts like this, where you can get free education. And I started listening to just a few of the Canadian episodes of the podcast and everything. And I was like, wow, these guys are local. These guys are doing this. They're not doing anything special. They're just regular guys who are working and investing in real estate. And then I heard this one episode, and this guy's story really stuck out to me. And I said, you know what? Like, I don't know a lot about this. I'm going to try and, buy some properties, but I like this guy's episode. So then I actually tried to buy my first property without knowing anything, just from listening to a couple episodes. And actually, it fell through because of financing. And so I was like, I'll never buy a property. And I was very upset. And I was like, how am I ever going to do this? Like, I just tried to buy one. I can't even do that. And this was back a few years ago when prices weren't even as inflated as they are now. I'm like, oh, I'll never be able to do this. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to give up, because I listened to a few more episodes and these guys kept saying how, oh, you know, we messed up when we were learning and when we were starting, and it's a pretty big learning curve. So I went back to the episode and I ended up reaching out to that guy because he offered a coaching program, and that's kind of what launched my journey in real estate. And that's how I was able to get into where I am now, which is investing in the multifamily and being able to do these duplex conversions and everything like that.
So coaching was a big part of your getting started then.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it is.
So real quick, any notable roles in movies, shows, or commercials?
Yeah, I did like a couple Rogers commercials that went around for a little bit and stuff like that, and a few other TV shows had some small parts on. But
cool, you'll have to send me a sample.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Now, so you did the education, and obviously that's part of it. And for me, I think education was a big part of it too. Although I didn't do formal education, I did more start stalking people who are doing it legally, of course. Yes. And politely harassing them legally also with their consent. As to how it is that they're doing what they're doing, what they've done. And what I've noticed is that people love to talk about themselves, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think, everyone wants to share what they've been up to. And I think it's kind of our nature. Part of it is like, haha, I got it. I figured it out. But other part of it is like, hey, like I did it. I'd love to help you, bridge the gap.
Yeah.
I'll help you learn it. So you did some coaching. What were they telling you to do?
Basically, a lot of the stuff we started with, which I'm very, very happy about, is mindset. Because real estate is an industry where you're going to hit a lot of hiccups, but there's not any hiccup that nobody hasn't hit before. Mm-hmm. So there's always going to be somebody who's experienced the same thing that you're going through. And you just need to learn the ways to overcome these things. And I was fortunate enough that the guy who I was doing coaching with had built his portfolio to over 200 units. You don't get that size of a portfolio without experiencing almost everything. And so stuff that I was thinking was, end of the world, and my mind's going, oh, this is a failure, and I'm a failure, and this is awful. And he was just like, listen, I had the same thing happen to me multiple times. It's going to happen to you again in the future. It's not a big deal. You'll work through it and all these other things. And just, eliminating self-doubt, because it seems very complex when you look at real estate from far away, because people are going, well, it's such big numbers, and there's renters and the landlord tenant board and all these other things. But once you're actually involved with it, you realize it is basically just systems and steps. And it was a big help having somebody teach me those systems and steps and get in line.
Awesome. Yeah. And I would have to agree. One of the things that I've been telling people for the last little while, because it was like the first thing I ever did that actually worked, was I stopped trying to create the wheel on my own. And I started, again, copying what other people were doing. It's a big market. There's room for a lot of people. So I would copy. There was this one particular guy for me that was doing a lot of student rentals, and he was doing a nice job with them. Nice, not great. And he had this like method. It was cookie cutter, and he was doing hundreds. So I'm like, well, I just want a little piece of that.
Yeah.
So, maybe if I could do a couple. So I just, I took his model. I found the engineer he used. I called his buyers. I called, people who were providing financing for his buyers. Like it was funny. I just dug right into it, learned what was going on, and then replicated it. And I just made it a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Just a little bit better finishes, maybe a little bit better cash flow. Kept the appraisers happy. I was able to keep some properties through applying exactly that model. I guess if you can't beat them, join them.
Yeah.
Rather than try and carve out your own path. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that leads a lot of people to failure. And then they give up, right? Like you hit that wall, you said, and you're like, oh, I'll never do this. But your coach kind of said, well, no, I've hit that wall.
Yeah.
Did you have what's one specific incident that happened to you where you're like, this where it really rocked you?
There was the first property that I tried to buy, which fell through. Like I said, I wasn't able to buy that one because of financing. And then the next one this was the first property I was buying with my actual coach. And it was this triplex. Everything was great. It was going to be a really exciting deal. And all of a sudden, a couple days before closing, they're going, well, we don't have the insurance information. They haven't let the inspectors through and all this stuff. And I'm going, well, what do you mean? Like, how have they not been through? Like, we've got 2 days. Like, this is so close. And they said, oh, yeah, the seller has and the agent keep pushing off the appraiser. They won't let them through. And I'm going, well, why? And they said, oh, well, the tenants are supposedly being difficult, and they're not letting the appraiser in and all this other stuff. And they said, we can't give you the financing until we get the appraisal from the insurance and get this all set up. And I'm going, well, what am I going to do? And they said, you're going to have to extend it. And I said, okay, well, so how does this work? I didn't know anything about extending. I'm like, can we break the deal? I don't know. And basically what it came down to is we had to go back to the seller and say, hey, listen, we only need 24 hours extra. That's all we needed, because they weren't letting the appraiser through. We said, you guys haven't let the appraiser in. Is there any way you can grant us 24 hours? And they said, yes, we can grant you 24 hours. Absolutely. No questions asked. $10,000 extra on the buy price, though. And I said, $10,000 for 24 hours? And they said, yeah, if you want to buy the property, you can either walk away from your deposit, which was $10,000 at the time. Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you can walk away from your deposit or pay us an additional $10,000 and keep the property. And so they knew they had me between, a rock and a hard place. And so my only option was to pay an additional $10,000 just to extend this deal by 24 hours.
You did it?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be frustrating.
And that was my first deal too. So I'm thinking, well, how am I going to do this? Like, this thing's a failure now. It's $10,000 over what I was planning on paying. And like, I'm at that time, $10,000 on an investment property to me seemed like that's the end of the world. That's an obscene amount of money. This is the first time that I was doing this. So that was great. I was able to sit and talk with my coach and be like, what am I going to do? This property's a failure now. Like, I've lost $10,000. He's like, you haven't lost $10,000. You paid $10,000 more than you expected. Mm-hmm. But in the grand scheme of owning a property, the $10,000 swing is so minor. And He basically walked me through the steps of like, listen, over 10 years, you are never going to notice that $10,000. And I was like, oh yeah. And we kind of walked through the numbers and he calmed me down. And that's why I ended up paying it.
That is nice. I'm sure you could have spent many sleepless nights having not had that conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
I think we all have that story of something that didn't go right. I probably have more stories than I care to admit. And that was exactly because I did not replicate what was working for someone. I was trying to create or figure it out on my own. And in the grand scheme of things, paying for coaching, had I gone down that route, probably would have saved me quite a bit of money. Yeah. There's definitely a pro and a con to it. Probably the biggest blunder I made in investing in real estate was investing in Ohio. I not that Ohio, there was anything wrong with that. It's just I was far away and I'd never done it. And I bought a property for $13,000 and then another one for $12,500.
Wow.
And the cash flows, it was like $500, $600 a month in rent. These cap rates, for anyone who understands cap rates, they were like 18 to 20%. If you don't worry about it. There was cash flow. It was like I was so excited, just so excited. And I think that logic kind of went out the window.
Yeah, when you see those numbers, it's just hard to not get excited.
Coach would have helped.
Yeah.
Do you still own that property?
I actually sold that one.
So you did sell that one.
Yeah.
Still profitable for you?
Yes. Yeah. I actually made pretty decent money on it. Yeah.
So what I wanted to talk to kind of shift gears into this whole discussion about duplexes, because that was sort of what your coach got you into, from the sounds of it.
Well, he has done that. He didn't necessarily get me into it, but he helped facilitate it. Absolutely.
Okay. Why'd you want to do those? Like, why duplexes instead of single families or something else?
Well, he was just big on multifamily in general. So minimum of 2. So that's why the first property that I bought was a triplex, because basically he walked through the logic of, if there is a recession, if your units do go vacant, what's going to hurt more when you're carrying 100% of the costs on a single family house, which is the case, right? And then you've only got one renter, anything happens. And when you look at how much those cash flow generally, it's usually maybe 100, a month on a single family home. You're excited about that, right? And you're not cash flowing too much. So 2 months of vacancy on a single family home can wipe out 2 years of cash flow on those properties.
Isn't that funny? I've thought about that so much. Like the Toronto method, like people buying in Toronto, and it's like $3,000 a month rent,
Yeah.
but their expenses are, like you said, $2,700.
Yeah.
So 1 month vacant is 2 years of cash flow.
Exactly.
It really does put it in perspective. Of course, in those markets, they tend to get a lot of appreciation.
Yeah.
So it's give and take with that. But I'm with you on that one. I've always bought for cash flow.
Yeah.
But yeah, the bigger you get, the bigger those numbers, vacancy really starts to hurt.
And it's not just about the cash flow itself, it's about the longevity of your portfolio. So if you want to scale your portfolio, if you have 10 single family homes and 5 of them go vacant, that's a lot of carrying costs, especially for the average person, right? Like think about that. If the average mortgage on those places is $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 plus property taxes, you might be paying $10,000 a month to carry those 5 houses. Not everybody has that laying around that they can, put that towards their extra properties. And the benefit of now either adding a basement suite to a property or just buying an existing duplex or anything multifamily is, generally speaking, it would be very rare, especially if it's a triplex or a fourplex, for all 4 or all 3 units to go vacant at the same time. Even with a duplex, are both sides going to clear out? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
there's a little bit of a hedge.
Yes.
You're sort of hedging your risk in that sense. Why don't you walk me through one of the deals you've done? So predominantly your strategy, it seems to me, has been to go in, convert it maybe from a single family to a multifamily, like a duplex. And then you've gone back to the bank and refinanced it to keep as a rental. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's the model.
Okay. So walk me through one of your successful, they call that BRRRR. I know I talk about that all the time. BRRRR. So you've gone in, walk me through one of the deals that you've successfully refinanced, or even one that you're in the process of, if you've got one of those examples handy.
Yeah. Well, we just had pretty big success recently with one. So we got the property for a pretty good price. We got it for around $360,000. And when it comes to basement suites, generally speaking, bungalows seem to be the best design for that. It can be all sorts of designs, because there was another one that we did, which was it was an older style home, actually, the 2-story. And you would never have expected to be able to basement suite it, but because it had almost like a garden side entrance, we were able to suite that as well and separate the units. So
yeah, I don't want to skim over that. Why is it that a bungalow is best?
Generally speaking, it offers the most amount of square footage in the basement, as well as a lot of the bungalow designs have like either a side entrance, a rear entrance, where it might go straight to the basement, like straight shot to it, or it'll have like a dual open stairway where it'll go to the upper level and one to the basement as well. So
yeah, I'm with you on that one. So we're in a bungalow right now. That side entrance is key, and so then you can use the front door for the main unit.
Yeah.
And then the side door can be for the lower unit.
Yeah.
And so that and I think one of the things when I was looking into this, I never actually bought one of those to convert, but it's actually minimal area for fire separation. It actually works really, really nicely, right?
Yeah, it's a huge difference, because if you have any sort of common hallway or shared entranceway, you have to have lighting now, because it's technically like a shared hallway and everything like that, as well as like you said, for fire. Now you have to have like a fire plan and all these things, because they share that. You can't have stuff kept in the hallway. If somebody puts their bike there, that's considered a fire hazard now, versus if it's separate entrances direct to the outside, you don't have to worry about those extra things.
Yeah, separate entrances seem to save money. Yeah. And in these type of projects, and we're going to get into your reno costs, have always scared me a bit, because I've seen how much renovations can cost when you open things up. The second you're opening up walls, your costs tend to go up quite a bit. So how have you been able to manage your renovation costs? Maybe walk me through what your costs were on this one, and what you did to kind of mitigate them being overly high.
Yeah. So one of the things that helps a lot, it's tougher to find bungalows with completely unfinished basements, because a lot of the time they've been around for longer. The people have finished the basements, so you find a lot of wood paneling down there as well, especially with the 60s, 70s bungalows.
Yeah, that's the best stuff right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Looks great. So if you can find the one that I had we just bought recently, it was, I'd say, like 60% unfinished. Basically, they had set it up as like a weird student rental where there was 3 bedrooms upstairs, and then they had tried to stuff kind of just 2 bedrooms downstairs, but they had left it kind of unfinished as well. It was poorly done, but it was a benefit to us because we were able to see more of what was going on behind the walls, right? There was only a couple little rooms that was like, okay, we don't know what's going on.
Is that why you want it unfinished? You want to be able to see what's behind the walls?
Yeah. So I was talking with a contractor, and when we were doing one of our basement suites before this project, he had said the best thing that you could do for us is have an unfinished basement, because he said marrying the two is always a little bit tougher if there's already work down there, because you either have to gut it or try and work around and combine both of the things. He said, if they have an open space, he said, we can do whatever we want down here. We get to set the wiring. We get to do all these things.
Wiring's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I was doing my research, I spoke with my electrician because I was just about ready to do it, buy one of these in the Hamilton area. And I was about ready to pull the trigger and buy one. And I called him up and I'm like, what would you like? And he's like, well, we can do, you want to separate your panel, right? You want to have a panel for upstairs, panel for downstairs. He's like, as long as it's gutted, no problem. I can give you some clarity on costs.
Yeah.
The second it's not, well, now it's like surgery. You're paying them, God knows how much per hour. It could be 60, 70, 80, depending on who they've got working on site.
Yep.
That's not a cost that you take lightly, right?
No.
It's going to add up. So you're looking for mostly gutted. Would you gut it if it wasn't already?
It would depend on the design of the basement, because when you're walking through a lot of these properties, a lot of the time there might actually already be a full bathroom and a full bedroom down there. If that's the case, you don't want to have to rip that out. It's a lot of work that you can save yourself and a lot of money. Hopefully you can limit the amount that you have to rip out to where you're going to put the kitchen or any of these other areas. And then a lot of the time you can kind of see, that's one of the other benefits of the bungalow, is you can kind of mirror what is going on already with the main level. If you can try and connect the plumbing and do all these things to the kitchens above each other and everything like that, that becomes a little bit easier because the square footage is almost the same as that level.
Okay, so you're saying I have plumbing above, and if I can make my bathroom right below, it's easier to hook into that plumbing.
Yeah.
It makes it, definitely is going to minimize your cost. I love seeing how that stuff works out.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite parts of renovating. Like, it's like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
To me, it's like Lego. How are we going to get, okay, that pipe needs to come in here. And I should leave this to the contractors on site, but I kind of general contract my own stuff. So I'll have site guys, but I still do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, okay, we need to do this. Here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then we go back and forth. And I don't know. I just find that fun. It's good. You got to enjoy what you do, right?
Yeah. And that is a big benefit to these projects as well, because the design and the creating of, let's say, like a flip, that's really fun because you get to enjoy the design of it. But when you're adding a basement suite or doing an addition like you do, you get to feel like you're creating a whole separate unit. So you're not building a brand new house, but you are essentially building a brand new dwelling unit for somebody to live in, and it is fun.
You take pride in like creating something really nice?
Yeah, we always want to make sure that our stuff is things that we would want to live in, regardless of, the area and who your tenant base is going to be in. Obviously, you always want employed people who you feel like are going to treat your properties well, good credit scores, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, you want to finish it as best as you possibly can for obviously the right value, because your name is stamped on the property, especially guys like, well, I know you self-manage your properties, right?
I've recently switched to self-managing, and that's a decision in flux right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'll eventually be employing some help, but probably directly working for me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so at the end of the day, you're stamping your name on it. Your face is going to be there. They know you're the owner. It's like, do you want to have a slummy property, or do you want to have something that it's like, hey, listen, I designed this. This is the project that we did and all that stuff. And it you have some pride in your work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love talking people through the vision. Like, if they don't get it, I don't even want them as a tenant.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't love what I did there, then you
get it?
We might not be a good fit for each other. So
yeah.
I think that's the beauty of it, is I'll price my stuff that it will naturally repel people who are not going to appreciate the nicer touches. So, which I'm happy with that. I don't want the lower, I don't want to say just lower income. I just don't want the ones that are just looking for a deal. I want the ones that are looking for a home that they're gonna love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your reno cost?
That one came close to about just shy of around 60,000. We were very fortunate that we didn't have to do too many renovations on the main floor, because that is a cost that can really increase depending on the shape of the property that you actually bought it, because you're going to have at least 50 grand in the basement to do the basement suite. That's kind of, I don't know, maybe you have a good contractor hookup who can do it for a little bit less, but it's probably going to be somewhere around there. But if you have a major renovation upstairs as well, you basically have to build in the same budget you would to flip that house, because if it's completely outdated, like we just said, you want the good tenants, you have to renovate the upstairs at the same time and do that. So that can add on 20,000-30,000 to any renovation like that, any basement unit.
Absolutely. If you're just gutting a bathroom on the main floor, maybe not too bad, maybe a few $1,000s. But the second you're replacing the kitchen, man, cabinets are expensive. Especially if you want nice ones, right? You can get the IKEA special, and there's no problem with that, except for banging your head against the wall when you find out they forgot to deliver you a part and the store is an hour and a half away.
Yeah.
Which that was the end of IKEA days for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it gets expensive pretty quick. And believe me, look, those numbers sound pretty reasonable to me. Like $60K to reno a basement, you're finishing it from scratch pretty much. Separate. That includes a separate electrical service.
Yes. Yep. So we've done that on our properties just because we find it a little bit easier when you have the units to separate the utilities. For one, for cash flow, obviously it's going to bring up your cash flow value, because you're not going to be able to, like, if you can put in a separate meter, so you can charge them, put their name on the utilities and everything like that, which, I mean, we have properties where we are paying the utilities, and we've been fortunate where they're not, knock on wood, too bad with the with the utilities. But I've heard some horror stories. People have baseboard heating, they got all inclusive properties, and can be a little expensive.
Oh man, I've got so many stories. I pay for utilities on all my student rentals.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Oh my God. It's not the end of the world. Like, I kind of can laugh about it. So that should give you an indication. But one time I had enough, so 134 cubic meters of water in 1 month off one of my properties. And it was right around the spring, just the time when people start filling up their pools.
Okay.
So I have a theory that a neighbor, although I couldn't find, I did the Google map trying to find which neighbor had a pool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had the plumbers come over and they're like, yeah, there's absolutely no way, no matter if you had a toilet running or a tap left on or every tap left on, that you used 134. It just wouldn't have happened. So yeah, they filled up a pool on, that's my theory. It happened. It was like $400 or something that month.
Wow.
Which you'd be like, oh, that sucks. But if you got cash flow, no, it's still cash flowed. Even though I had that bill, I still had cash flow. Yeah. So
that's great.
I mean, I was like, yeah, that sucks. But, as long as it doesn't happen again, it has not happened since. But you'll notice things, right? I'll watch my bills and I'll kind of know what's going on in the house. Another project I have, the addition, for some reason, is a little cold. The ductwork design just didn't push enough air into that back room. And it's kind of cold. So I can tell when the kid pulls out a heater, because my bill goes up like $70. Yeah, those things are fun. So you're saying separating is better, and I agree, because let them pay for that.
Yeah.
When they do that, let them pay for it. So you're only able to separate electrical, though, if you're only separating electrical, or are you separating water and gas as well?
Water is very difficult to separate. So we haven't done that yet, but we have looked into gas as well. So we're going to probably do gas on our next project.
Now, that would require that you had a separate heat source for both units.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something I just did on my current project that I'm finishing up. Separate water heater, separate furnace. And then, just go ahead, throw an extra gas meter up, and now you can separate that. So water's the hard one. Why is water the hard one?
It just seemed more difficult with the city because honestly, they basically just shut it down pretty quick when we were talking about it. They said, with the water meters, it's going to be more difficult. And we said, okay, well, what do we have to do for that? And then they started talking about, you're going to have to upgrade your services and do these other things. And we're going to have to work with the engineering department. And we just said, okay, well, the water is one of the lowest utilities anyway. So it ended up, for what the work it would look like it was going to require from us. I mean, maybe if like somebody knows someone who's separated the water, I haven't spoken to anybody who has, but you can get some more details on it, what the actual process is. But we just, for $100 a month, it's not worth kind of going through all of that process for what we were going through.
So I would tend to agree with you. With the water, I almost separated it. That's the one thing I didn't separate on my current project. And they told me this was in London. So I think every municipality is just a bit different, and it also depends, especially when you're dealing with the city, who you get, what day it is, what side of bed they woke up on. So they told me it was going to be $47 flat charge for the extra meter per month. So I already got 47 for the one. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, so 47 flat charge plus usage per month. That tenant's not even going to use $47 of water in a month.
No.
So that's where it occurred to me. I'm like, I can keep things down, costs down for the tenants by just splitting that bill 60-40, 60% to the front of the house and 40% to the back, and just sending it to them retroactively. So
yeah,
I don't think that's a perfect solution. I actually don't love that solution, but it was the best thing I came up with. I'm curious. Have you separated the bill? Like, have you billed it back to them, or are you just letting it ride?
So far we've just been paying the water. We just did all inclusive on the rents.
For water.
Yeah, for water, but the one property is all inclusive on everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? Oh, just because they weren't
we
separate.
hadn't separated it. No.
Okay. I did speak with a guy, and this is actually how I got that idea. He, what he does, he's out of Hamilton as well. And what he does is he just has everything not separated, single meter for electric, gas, and water.
Mm-hmm.
And he just does the 60-40 split.
Yeah.
Which he's gotten people to agree to. I mean, that works as long as no one goes crazy.
Yeah. It's difficult when you've got a larger family upstairs and either a single person or a couple in the basement, because then they tend to be like, okay, 60-40 still seems a little bit high for us when they've got kids taking baths and, running their TVs and doing all these things that it's like, we're not home, we work. Or if it's a single guy downstairs, it's like, how much of the utilities is he actually using? It can be a problem for that.
Yeah, what I'm going to do going forward probably is I'm going to analyze this one over the course of like a year or a few months.
Yeah.
See what they're using. And then I'm going to just create a monthly charge for water that's just flat.
Yeah.
And then if it varies, big deal. I'll eat the variance.
Yeah, that's a good idea as well. I went to an event once, and there was a woman who was speaking on basement suites, and she had done a ton of them, and she never separated anything. She just said, when I spoke to her about it, I said, well, what about utilities? You can cash flow a lot higher. She said, I just build it into the rents. I just add on, what I think, and she knows now because she's had that many properties, what the utilities are going to be. So she just has to make her rents that much higher, so it covers the average. It's essentially the same thing that you're talking about. She essentially puts the flat fee just into the rents, and she eats whatever the overages are going to be.
Right. So what you do, you get a gauge of what your utilities are.
Yeah.
And then still advertise it at the plus utilities price. And then just when they come in, say, okay, I have a year's worth of utilities on this place. This is what it costs. Here's the charge. I'm just adding it on because I don't have them separate.
Yeah.
I mean, who's really going to argue with that?
Yeah.
They can, if they've ever rented somewhere, they know what utilities cost. So
yeah,
as long as you're reasonable, you should be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were total in on this property for $420,000 after your reno. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what was your next step?
Like after the renovation?
You rent it out first, or did you go straight to the bank?
No, rented it out.
Okay, so rent. What'd you rent it out for?
For the upper unit, we got $1,675.
Okay. And what on the lower?
That's $1,275.
$1,275. So you have that number as a total?
I think it's just around 3,000.
So you were 1,700
be like 3,900.
Yeah, 2,900.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 2,900 a month. Okay, and then you went back to the bank, and did you get them to refinance it?
We haven't refinanced this one that we just did.
Okay.
But we have checked all the sales in the area, and we would be refinanced based on sales that have been happening in the last 3 months. Mm-hmm. We'd be refinancing around $450.
So you're saying $450 is the value you're likely to get?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's work through that math. So if, say the appraiser comes out, appraises you for $450, how much are you likely to get as a result of that? Like, how does that work with the bank?
So generally the bank will give you 80% LTV, which is loan to value.
Okay.
And that would bring us up to almost exactly to around our original purchase price of $360,000.
So the bank's going to give you, you're figuring 360 when you finally do get this all done.
Yeah.
You're going to get 360 back. So let's just say 360 there. And then so you're all into the property though for about 420. So you still got some money in. You're not getting all of it back out, correct?
No, basically the renovation cost will be left in the property.
Okay. So you're going to have, roughly 60,000. So you have 420,000 in total into the property. You bought it for 360. You put $60,000 of reno in. That took you to $420,000 total asset value. So the house is worth 420 kind of as for what you've put into it. But then you get the appraiser saying it's worth actually 450. So there's your boom. You got $30,000 of instant equity for your hard work. And then the bank's going to say, okay, 80% of 450, that's 360. So if we work backwards, you've got 420 into it between what you bought it for and renoed, less 360 that you get from the bank, which is leaving you with 60,000 in.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so 60,000 in. Okay, we're gonna come back to that number because there's gonna be a return to calculate here.
Yeah,
we'll just do back of the envelope cocktail napkin kind of numbers here.
The best kind.
Yeah, the best kind. Really, I do agree though. I mean, a complicated spreadsheet isn't really that valuable for explaining an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've got 60 into it when you're all refinanced. Let's just fast forward and say that all goes smoothly. What is your monthly cash flow on this property once you've refinanced? Have you estimated that?
Yep. So basically, it will all depend on, I like to be very conservative with my cash flow calculations. I calculate with the vacancy, with the maintenance, with the management, where a lot of people don't tend to, if they manage it themselves, they'll include that in their cash flow.
That's okay.
You can include that in your cash flow because technically that's money that's coming to you. When I'm doing it, I'm self-managing right now, but down the road, I'm going to be handing off the management. So I've built in a 10% variance for property management.
So you're allowing 10% for management.
Yeah.
That's pretty generous. But I like that you're being conservative because if your numbers work when you're conservative, then they work when things are better than conservative. So that's great. So what do you figure your cash flow would be then?
It's about $400 a month.
That's pretty good cash flow when you're being that conservative. Okay, so in reality, probably higher, but we'll just say 400. So 400 times 12. I know I should be able to do that in my head, but I'm doing multiple things at once.
Hey, better safe than sorry.
Yeah, so $4,800 a year for that, and then your total mortgage. See, I've got like complicated amortization charts to calculate principal pay down, right? Because your mortgage is not just principal; it's also interest. So it's not just interest, it's also principal. So you're paying down your mortgage, which means you're building equity on a monthly basis. So mortgage pay down, my friend told me this. He's like, it usually works out to be about 3%.
Oh, your
annual pay down is about 3% of your mortgage value.
Okay.
So let's just say that's true. It's not going to be exact, but so you're paying off about 3% of $360,000, which is your new mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So what's that going to work out to? So that one I actually probably do need a calculator. Times 0.3. So you're paying down about $10,800. We'll say.
Yep.
Over the course of the year. And then in that area, so there's several ways to win when you buy real estate. One, you're forcing the value. Two, and when I say forcing the value, you're renovating. Two, you're getting monthly cash flow. So that's way number two. Three, you're paying down your mortgage.
Yeah.
And four is appreciation. So Spencer, what do you think? First off, just explain what appreciation is for our listeners, and what do you think it's going to be for you in that area?
Yeah. So the appreciation is obviously year over year, generally speaking, especially if you take a longer term snip of years. Properties are going to appreciate over time. Real estate's appreciated for 300 years, whatever it is.
Going up in value, right?
Yeah, basically it's the increase of value on the property. Yeah. In the Niagara region where our properties are, it's averaged about 7% over the last 10 years.
Wow.
I try to be more conservative because I don't think we're going to keep the same spikes that we've been hitting necessarily. But so when I actually am very conservative with my appreciation.
I love it.
And I only do 2% a year.
That's really conservative.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So and I'm okay with that. These are very conservative numbers. I think But if you, again, you do it conservatively, if you do that, you're going to end up, you're not going to end up being disappointed, very likely. You're most likely going to be pleasantly surprised.
Found money.
Yeah, found money. I think that's great. Okay, so appreciation. So 2%, and that's pretty standard. So for those of you listening, whether you're in Canada, US, or wherever you're listening from, pretty much across the world, any property is going up in value in the long run. And that's because we have our currency constantly being devalued. Every year, our dollar becomes less valuable. It can buy less. So that's called inflation. So because you can buy less, your real estate didn't become less valuable. Therefore, if each dollar doesn't go quite as far, the price of your real estate needs to go up a bit. If that was confusing, find a different definition. There are many, but basically, yeah. So we've seen pretty consistently in Canada. I think if you look at the long run, probably 2 to 3%.
Yeah,
which matches inflation, and that tends to be a safe bet. But if you look at areas like Toronto and the greater Toronto area, and people can do this across the states, and looking at the greater like New York area, New York City and Boston, San Fran, all those things, they just keep going up in value, right? And it's way faster than inflation.
Yeah.
So in this case, I actually think, and we were talking about this earlier, I think that you're in for a much more appreciation than that.
Yeah.
But 2% is a good, yeah.
Like I said, I'm very conservative with a lot of these things because I just like the idea of the found money, but I also like to know worst case scenario, what is this going to be? And I just know that there's no way there's going to be less than 2% appreciation over the next 10 years. I don't see that happening. So
even if you have, we could have a correction, but even in a correction, we're probably okay with that.
Yeah.
So absolutely, I think you're being very conservative there, and that's great. I like that. If your numbers work conservative, then they work not conservative too. So 2%, so 0.02 times the $450,000 value that you have today.
Yeah, it's about $9,000.
Yeah, about $9,000 over the next 12 months, and that number will grow. But we're just going to do a 1-year return here. So in 1 year, your total return, and we're not going to factor your renovation. We'll just go outside of that.
Okay.
So not including your renovation, just what your property is going to continue to do, if you just manage it and let it do its thing, is going to be $4,800 for cash flow. It's going to be about $10,800 for your principal pay down, and about $9,000 for your appreciation.
Yeah.
So that's $24,600. So it's just $24,600, and your total cash in the deal, so we're going to call it your investment, is the $60,000 left in the deal after the bank gave you a whole bunch of money back, correct?
Yeah.
So we've got $24,600 divided by $60,000. Your return on investment is 41%.
Wow, that's low.
And that's conservative.
Yeah. Yeah, like we said, if we were to bump the appreciation to what that region has seen for its true like appreciation over the last 10 years, I mean, we're well over 50% ROI, right? So
right, yeah, all it takes is one big year, right? Like I saw it in London last couple of years. Stuff that used to go for 200 is now going for almost 400.
Yeah,
I mean, if you had a couple of years like that, so we're talking just the average year, you're talking 41%. I mean, who gets that?
Yeah, you're not getting that in any other market.
Yeah, not in your stocks.
Investment class.
Yeah. I mean, granted, you do have some sweat equity in this, which we can't put on paper. There's no dollar there for it. But this is the thing I wanted to illustrate, is just what's possible when you're willing to roll up your sleeves and not necessarily pick up a hammer on your own, but, make the calls, pick up your phone, get in there and make this happen, rent it out and hire the right people. Mm-hmm. Are you looking to do more of this?
Of this model?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely something that I'm going to keep moving towards. It's a model that you can really scale with because you do get a lot of your capital back. If, not every property works out where you're getting the entirety of your down payment back so you can bring that to the next property or anything like that. But even if you can bring any of your down payment back, it's still money that you're getting brought back from the property tax-free that somebody else is going to be paying down while there's people living in the house paying for the mortgage, right? So at the end of the day, it's almost free money and you get to bring it to the next one. So
the tax-free part is fantastic, right? You sell that property. By the time you pay the taxes on it, are you really pulling that much more money out. Well, yeah, you're gonna pull money out, but is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? And I would say, I said this on a previous episode. I hate driving by a property that I sold and saying, "Wow, I would have made so much more money if I just held on to it."
Yeah, that's the two properties that I sold in the last little bit. I drove by them the other day and I was like, "Oh no!" Especially because the one, which was my first one, the triplex that I bought, I was so proud of that because we had to renovate all of the units. It was a massive renovation. And I painted the outside. I got the windows done. I got the capping. It was a beautiful property by the time I was done. Mm-hmm. And the new owners have just not treated it as nice. And I'm like, this is the property now. If I had just kept owning it and doing that now, it's worth probably 60, 70, 80 grand more in only a couple of years since I sold it. It's like,
yeah. Isn't that the worst when you see a property you sold? I've been in a couple that I sold after the fact, just helping out the new owner.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing the students living in it, and most of my students were good, but one of my earliest projects, it wasn't as nice as the ones I do now.
Okay.
And I walked in and they just brought in the ugliest furniture, so I furnished them now because I saw it, I'm like, you ruined it.
You ruined it. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and you did this. Just the junkiest something you could have found on the side of the road. I'm like, okay, I will furnish them from now on. Not the bedrooms, but I mean the common areas if you wanted to kind of keep that appeal, especially for re-renting, right? You bring somebody in there to re-rent it and they have all this crappy furniture around it. It just looks bad. So it's kind of an investment in the future of being able to rent a project.
Yeah, and especially with the level that you finish your properties, you do a really good job. And I think the client base that you're looking to rent to, because you get a little bit of a premium on your student rentals for sure, they don't want to come in and see that somebody did grab that couch from the corner and then put it in there. They want to see like, okay, I've seen what you furnished with. It looks really sharp. So that's something that anybody would want to rent.
Yeah. I mean, there's a delicate balance there between spending too much and of course, if you don't spend enough, then you get something that it's not leather or pleather. I like pleather, or vinyl, because if you do fabric, then somebody spills something on it. You only got it for a few years, and then it's like, you gotta have to replace that anyway. So
you like the pleather?
I like something that you could spill something, or I mean, let's face it, they're university kids. They might throw up.
Yeah,
it could happen. I'm not, as much
will happen.
As much as I do nice stuff, everybody has a moment of weakness. So I'm not gonna hold that against them. But I don't want to have to buy a new couch either. So getting back to what you've done, and I like to ask this question every time. You've done something that to a lot of people seems just out of reach. And what I want to know is how did you know when you saw the deal, when you saw this house, a single family home for $360,000, which I'm assuming you bargained to get.
Yeah.
How did you know you would make money?
Basically, if you can become familiar with the market that you're investing in, you should generally know what your ARVs are going to be. ARV stands for after repair value. Okay. And that would be the value after you've finished the renovations, whether that's just, renovating a single family home or adding a basement suite. If you have comparables for the area, you can find out what your after repair value is going to be. And then you can say, okay, well, if that's what my ARV is going to be, and I know that I've done some renovations and it's going to cost around X, I can get the property for this price. And if all these numbers make sense, then I can buy this and do this deal. And basically it all comes down to numbers and systems. And that's where a coach can come in handy, because if it's your first time doing a renovation, it's hard for you to budget. Well, how much does a bathroom cost? The bathroom could cost you $3,000, it could cost you $10,000, but somebody who's done a lot of renovations on multiple properties is going to be able to quote that a little bit. Even if they're not a professional contractor, they're going to be able to know closer to what the price is going to be.
Yeah, interesting point that you brought up, because I knew nothing on my first deal. Nothing. I had a friend who was a farmer, came from like a farmer background, and they had done, barn building and what have you. And he had all kinds of, contacts, and he'd call me, like, he was a realtor that acted for me at the time.
Okay.
And he'd call his friends. He'd be like, hey, what do you think it would cost to do this? And I'm like, back of the envelope saying, well, we have 10 windows. How much should I budget per window?
Yeah.
What about flooring? Flooring was kind of easier. I'm like, oh, I can I'll find a deal. And I did. I found like I was the cheapest person that no one would have ever wanted to deal with.
That's great.
You kind of got to start that way.
Burn all your bridges on the first one.
I wouldn't say burn, but I was like, okay, well, how about we get a deal? Okay, yeah, can you do a little cheaper? No, I'm going to have to get a couple other quotes.
Yeah.
So, now I'm more like, let's build a relationship. Let's work together. I'm willing to pay you a touch more, but there needs to be value there, and there needs to be a relationship and respect, and there's a delicate balance. But yeah, just not knowing, right? Not knowing. And so you mentioned a coach can help you. Absolutely. I had another friend who did a bunch of these, and he'd kind of just wrap off. He'd be like, yeah, that house, yeah, it's not going to cost you more than $100, but he wouldn't really have like a reason. He wouldn't be able to tell me specifics. He'd just kind of wrap off a number, and it was based on his experience. And I had a gauge. I'd seen what he was doing. So I'm just like, okay, well, if he could do it, then I could do it. And what I would do is I would just go a little cheaper on some of the materials. Like he was doing quartz. I did laminate on my first one, a countertop. I regret that. If I could go back, I would have put stone in there. Not every property needs that, but for my model, it's better. And I would just find deals on everything. I was on Kijiji, Craigslist, trying to find deals. And so I guess I did sort of take a little bit of a risk there, but because I had that, I had enough people kind of in the know, and I knew I was willing to get there, get in, even sleep in the house. And, I literally just babysat trades. I knew nothing. So I babysat the trades. Yeah. And I came in, that was one of my cheapest renovations ever.
Wow.
One of my first. Yeah. Just the more hands-on you're willing to be, it's kind of like sweat equity, right?
Yeah.
If you want to step back, then it starts costing a little bit more, right?
Well, my friend's dad made this joke one time, and it's always stuck with me, and I think it's very funny, but he said, you're either handy or you're handsome. And
what if you're both?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a joke. But I am not handy by any means. So sweat equity for me means due diligence, not actual manual labor. And I have not swung a hammer on any of my properties. The most amount of work I've done, and this is how I knew that I was not handy, is there was a crack in the sidewall of one of the bathtubs. I bought a repair kit, repaired it. It looked awful, but I repaired it, and I was like proud of myself. Like, wow, I'm so handy now that I own all these properties. I can fix the side of a bathtub. Yeah. So,
you gotta be selective about that. I have picked up a hammer, a framing nailer, which was way more fun than a hammer. Some of it just looked like fun. Yeah. I never got to do any of that. Like I went to business school and I was supposed to, work with my pen and my keyboard and my phone, which I would say is the most efficient thing that someone like you or I could do would be to work with our phone. You're calling people, you're setting up arrangements, you're setting up contractors.
Yeah.
That's where your value add is. You're buying houses, you're selling deals, like, what have you. That's our value add, I think. But, it doesn't hurt to know what goes into it.
Yeah, I try to ask a lot of questions so that I'm aware. Because, if you have to change that toilet and get this tile flooring in, how long does something like that take you? Even if they're not quoting it right there, then I can at least know, all right, well, that bathroom was, 300 square feet, let's say. It was a decent sized bathroom. He said it would take about 2 days to do the flooring. Now when I go to the next size bathroom, I can say, okay, well, it's 2 days labor to get that floor done and whatever it's going to be. And
that's a smart thing. Yeah. I did that too. Yeah, you kind of work backwards. Well, what do people make these days? $20 an hour? I was thinking like 18. I know my misconception about trades. They do make a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I would just kind of work backwards and say, well, if it takes this long, I was crunching the numbers, like here's the range I should be in. Yeah. And then I would fight them if they were higher than that. It's probably not a bad thing to start out that way. And then you learn, and then you kind of figure, okay, I know that job costs more.
Yeah.
And I know, and this is why. And you just ask, hey, if I got a bill that was too high from a contractor, I'd say, this is higher than I was expecting. Like, what happened? Please explain.
Yeah.
And then they usually do, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. No, I get it. And I'd like you to work for me again, so I'm not gonna tell you that I won't pay. It's more of a, let's work this out.
But the 3 quotes rule, you should always get 3 quotes,
especially starting.
I mean, I think you should always do it. Just keep your contractors honest and everything like that. Because the first property that we were doing the basement suite on, we got quotes all the way from $50,000 to $115,000. That was the range. 50 to 115. So you should probably get multiple quotes because you don't know who is going to be giving you. It usually ends up being somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess my approach, and I speak strongly on this, but maybe I shouldn't because you're proving that there is other ways of doing this. But I always say to people, you can't afford to hire a general contractor on your first project. You need to be in there. And to a certain degree, I think that if you're getting 3, I would say more like 5 if you're doing general contractors.
Yeah.
And then structure your contract like it's bulletproof. Like they don't get advances. I don't pay deposits like to new people. I would never pay a deposit to a new contractor.
Yeah.
Now I'm to the point where I work with referred people. Like I've known them for many years, or maybe they were referred by one of the people who already work for me. In which case, there's a little more trust there. I might pay for materials,
yes,
but I don't give a deposit because it literally takes the power right out of your hands.
Yeah.
If you gave somebody a deposit and you're waiting for them to show up, we got tied up on another job. I heard horror stories and I was so careful. And part of it was because when I was in Ohio, I gave like $10,000 cash to my property manager, who proceeded to put like maybe $3,000 into renovations for the property and then live off my money. And then insult to injury, he put a tenant in my property on top, and he never gave me my money back. And he started taking and collecting her rent and not paying it to me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, money stays in my pocket.
Yeah.
And then, so what I've learned and what's worked well is milestone payment. If somebody has a problem with milestone payment, say, I can't do a deposit, but tell you what, I'm willing to pay you, every week. If you need me to pay you multiple times a week, I'm willing to do that. But I'm not going to give you money up front for anything more than materials that are going to be here on site. And if we're going to do that, I'd rather be the person buying them directly and having them delivered.
Yes. So that's what I've done.
Yeah.
I will go and I say, get me the list of what you need. Tell me the materials. I'll pay for all the materials. So nothing's coming out of your pocket. You don't have to put down any, money for these. You know that all you're paying for now is your own labor with you and your guys. So then you, like you said, set a milestone of like, okay, when you finish this kitchen, I'll release an additional $5,000 when you do this. And then that's definitely one of the best ways to do it. And I think the materials, buying it yourself is the best because 1, they're not marking it up anymore. And 2, you now have the materials yourself on that site. Whereas you don't know how, like, let's say they say, okay, the total material cost is going to be 15,000. You give them 15,000. They didn't buy all 15,000 worth of materials right when they went, where you can do that. They're probably getting 5,000, and when they need the next 5,000, they're going to do that. But either way, they've already taken the money for the materials. So.
It's extremely dangerous.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of good contractors out there that won't like me saying this, and I'm not. There's no slight against them. I know you're good, and totally respect that. And if that's the way you run your business, that's great. It's just as a consumer, and especially one that's new. How do you know who you can trust and who you can't? Yeah, I think it's best that you set something up that can work for both people, and paying deposits, just in my opinion, doesn't work. Milestones, great, but deposits, I've learned to regret it. And you know what? I will do it with like guys I really trust that I've been working with for a long time. If we're like buying $20,000 in windows and they need half of it up front to place the order, okay, I can understand that. So.
And like you said, if the relationship's there, it's different. But for anybody who's starting out, this is for the new people who are, well, even if you're not new, but you're using a new contractor, if the relationship's not there, you never want to give these people money up front. Yeah, and
I've said it, like one of the best trades I have, the first conversation he had with me was, okay, well, we typically do a deposit. I'm like, I'm going to stop you right there. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I can't do that. And, we just worked it out. I'm like, here's what I can do. And a friend of mine tried the same thing with a property he did in Buffalo. He's from this area. He did a property down there. And the contractor just wouldn't do it. And eventually he caved. He's like, okay, I'll give you the deposit.
Yeah.
Long story short, turned into a nightmare.
Yeah.
Turned into a nightmare. The guy took his money and didn't do anything. So it's, just a testament to it. And hey, why not? Just be smart, be safe. It pays. Literally to be conservative with deposits. Just one last kind of thought that I want to go through is your permits. Did you get a permit for doing what you did?
Yes, on some of them, yes, we have. There's one that we did not do it though.
Okay, because you didn't need it, or it was already a status. Or...
It was, the zoning allowed it.
Okay,
and then it was already like mostly done.
Okay.
So we kind of just
Assumed that it was
married the
done.
things
Yeah.
and assumed it. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, so permitting process, was it easy on the ones that you did get permits? How did you know you were going to be able to get that?
Yeah, so it depends on the city or municipality that you're dealing with. Some are a lot better than others. I can use only a couple in Niagara region where I'm familiar with. I mean, I've heard, and I mean, even dealing with them myself, St. Catharines is not always the most welcoming to the basement suites, even though they have so many properties that are zoned for it. But like they've got limiting on their sizes and bedrooms and all these other things. Whereas if you go literally 10 minutes down the highway to Welland, they pretty much told me when I spoke to them on the phone and through our process, they basically said, if you can fit a basement suite down there, we'll allow it. And I was like, okay, that's a great attitude for you guys to have. And they were a lot better to deal with. Absolutely.
So speak with zoning.
Yes.
A key. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Speak with zoning. A lot of cities have a map online where you can find out zonings in different areas.
Yeah.
You can click them, figure out what the zone is, look up the chart. It explains it in plain English, although sometimes it's a long read, what you can do. I like the ones that have a table. They just say, hey, this is your zone. You can do this.
Yeah.
But if you're in Ontario, there's been a mandate passed that basically says every municipality has to have a policy for allowing basement suites or granny suites, basically secondary dwelling units. So find out what your municipality offers. And if you're outside of that area, it's still worth checking. And then you might just need a zoning that allows for multiple units. But it's still doable. Okay, so
that just interrupt. Yeah. That is one of the benefits though of the basement suite is they actually don't always view that as being a duplex. No. So a lot of these municipalities, you actually can do this on an R1 zoning if it's just, a single family zoning, because it's an accessory suite.
Yes.
It's a granny suite. And you like on those ones, maybe you're not separating the utilities, but you're doing it as an accessory suite and it's a legal second dwelling unit that you're now able to rent out and you don't have to get it rezoned. It's not a duplex or anything like that. So that's one of the benefits of the basement suites as well.
Yeah. I resist going down the rezone road. It takes too long. I like quick. I'm very impatient.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's very expensive. It's actually more expensive to rezone an existing property than it is to sever to a brand new lot.
Yeah, that's a whole can of worms we could go. That's another episode. Yeah.
Funny.
Yeah.
Classic city.
Okay, so I wanted to get your take on what you see happening. Do you see our market kind of picking up? What's next for you?
Well, there's been a lot of discussion, obviously, lately of like, when's this correction happening? Interest rates are going up. There's going to be a crash and all these other things. And I'm not going to say that is not going to happen or will not happen or cannot happen, because at the end of the day, we never know truly what's going to happen with the market. But all we can do is check the fundamentals and economics of Canada. So far, just based on our gross immigration numbers and all of these things, because of how far back we are when it comes to rental supply, housing supply, everything like that compared to our growth, it just seems tough to think that there's going to be any sort of devastating crash. There might be a bit of a dip, especially because we've even seen it in the last couple months with all the interest rate increases. There was a bit of a dip, but already again, in some of the markets that we've been looking at picking up more properties, stuff is selling right away. Yeah. Every time we find something, we're like, oh, that's perfect. Boom. I mean, there was just a property we went to buy. We were like, oh, okay, it hadn't listed for very long. And it just sold for 30 grand over asking. And this is in our quote unquote slow market and all this other stuff. So that's why Canada is also not a market. There's all regions and there's cities and all that stuff. And then I always think it's funny. Well, the Canadian housing market. Well, there's no Canadian housing market. Yeah. There's housing markets in Canada. But I think based on the economics for Southern Ontario, Golden Horseshoe region and all that stuff, this is something that we were discussing before the podcast. But those numbers, essentially, in 10 years, there will be a whole second city of Toronto's worth of people existing in the province of Ontario, almost specifically in that region in 10 years.
So like 2.5 million more people.
2.5 million more people in Southern Ontario, Golden Horseshoe in the next 10 years.
They're going to need a place to live.
Yeah.
So just for those who are not in this area, we'll give you kind of something to allow you to apply this to where you are. Basically, we have a mandate where we are that they want us to intensify land. So they don't want us sprawling out and spreading and building on farmland and all that. They want us to allow our cities to grow up rather than out. Now, the problem with that is it takes time, and the approval process is very, very lethargic. It takes forever. So what we're coming into is we've basically got a market where it's difficult to keep up with the immigration. We have so much immigration. And so that's kind of where we're at right now is that we can't really keep up with the amount of people coming into our area, which is pushing our values way up. Now, there may be pockets in the US where that's a similar thing, especially where you're landlocked, right? If you have water on all sides, that's why those areas go up, because they can only go up. They can't go out. There's water. And if you're in areas like that where you've got water on one side and maybe something restricting building on the other, those are markets where you could probably expect to see a really aggressive growth if there's an influx of people coming into the area, really growth in prices. So look at your market and the economics of it. It's going to help you a lot. Anyways, Spencer, it's been a really good chat. I really enjoyed your story and certainly showing us how you achieved a 41% return on investment by rolling up your sleeves just a little bit and putting in the elbow grease. Certainly is inspiring to see, somebody that wasn't even involved in real estate. I don't think your family was. No, you just dove in and you were able to make that happen. It goes to show that if you're willing to put in the effort, maybe grab a coach or find somebody who's willing to mentor you, even if it's unofficially, just what you can do is quite impressive. So Spencer, just before we wrap up, if anyone would like to reach out to you, learn a little bit more maybe about what you're doing or get in touch, where's the best place for them to reach you?
They can email me. I'm always checking my email. It's probably too much. So that's just spencer@greyheights.com.
So Grey Heights, Grey?
EY, yeah.
Greyheights.com. Okay, I'll post that in the show notes as well. Spencer, it's been really inspiring. Really enjoyed what you had to say, and we'll definitely have to have you on again to tell us what you're up to as you get into your next project.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Okay, we'll see you guys on the next one. I just wanted to take a moment to quickly wrap up what we just talked about. Obviously, that was a long discussion with Spencer. He is full of wisdom and experience at a very young age. Unfortunately, we didn't get into how he finances his projects and some of that stuff. So if you are interested in that information, I will be having future guests on and we'll be talking about that. We also talked about that in episode 3, the episode with Steve Manicom, if you want to head back to that one, about basically creating wealth by using the BRRRR strategy, which we talked about today as well. So thanks for tuning in. Again, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Google Play podcasts, wherever you're listening. Please subscribe, and by all means, feel free to leave me some feedback. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next one.